And is there, before we get going in the agenda, is there any announcements or anything that we gotta make for the group? Perfect. Moving right along. We are online. All right.
Is that right? No participants on Zoom, is that right? It's
Makes it easy. All right. First agenda is going to be Alina on the amount of state needed to offset the cost for this testing.
Yeah, so this is just based on our couple conversations of sort of a hope for state aid, maybe covering the cost of CAT service or a partial cost of CAT service. We just wanted to put together some numbers for you. So it's this kind of blue chart that we put up on the screen. But it kind of just to run through an example for you all. So you can just use this chart for your own needs or information. If the state was able to give $1 million in state aid and 100 people purchased CAT service and wanted to have some sort of offset, the first 100 people would get $10,000 as an offset. Generally, this group, we're talking about 3,000 employees. So if all 3,000 employees wanted to purchase CAT service and be able to get some sort of offset, and there was $1 million, you're down at the far right column where each person would get $330 if all 3,000 people. So that's just sort of how to read this chart. It's just an informational item sort of for you all to see if you wanted all 3,000 people to get $10,000. We're talking about $30 million in state aid. That would be it. So just an informational item for you all. Happy to answer questions if the chart doesn't make sense. Or just any other questions about this, but just wanted to get this information out.
Questions? All right, seeing none, we'll go on to the staff memo for the LCPR staff memo on the MSR staff. New plan features.
So I can do an introduction into this one. We really hadn't put any numbers on paper for an MSRS plan. And so Susan and I spoke with Devin and Mike on Monday or Tuesday of this week. And we sort of talked based on the cost that Aaron was able to present to us, where are the employee representatives at that? So we wanted to just put that down on paper, our conversation with them on sort of what their hopes and goals are, and I can let them talk through it more. It was just sort of me putting down what I heard from them on paper. So you get some numbers out in front of you. And really, it would be following MSR as version 2, where the multiplier stays the same. Age 60, normal retirement age, COLA stays the same. The biggest difference from really what we've been talking about, I think, in this work group is that it does up the employer contribution rate as well as the employee contribution rate. So that's sort of a difference than what we've been seeing, and I will let anybody else speak to that. That's just what I was told. The other piece that is maybe new is in red under the first item, which is the definitions that we still don't know about the community correction services regional director or correctional field services director and whether they should be included or not. So that was just another discussion piece for the MSRS plan. And sort of before I open it up to the floor to talk MSRS plan features, I'll hand it over to Susan to talk about Metro Transit. So you have some conversation with them.
Yes, and I think someone actually was going to come today. Michael helped Holston. Hopefully we'll arrive and we'll introduce you to him. So Metro Transit is a state employer. What kind of organization that council is, but it's anyway, they are state employees, they are employees of that council. They are dispatchers. So Dar Pangoni was alerted us to this group. We talked with their union, which is the Transit Managers Supervisors Association, just this morning to explain to them what this work group is and what the plan is. So far, what the sub plan will look like. They were to join And they are looking at the definition of eligible employee for sub-plan, and we'll probably have some comments for it. They are interested, even though they understand they'll have to pay a lot for it. But they would like us to contact the employer. So there's Met Council, and there's also Metro Transit, so we'll probably end up talking with somebody from both of those organizations to get a sense of whether they want to be included in this. I think the bill does not, it's focused on telecommunicators. So there were two groups, probation and telecommunicators, state and county or city. They were to be included in these new pension plans. So I think this group fits that. And I think we would need to include them if they want to participate in it. So that's my logic. It's not like the forensic scientists who were not mentioned in the bill, but dispatchers are at transit and they do have an interest. So we can certainly talk about that more, but they understand they have to pay for it themselves. So hopefully this group doesn't have any real problem with that.
Just, can we clarify, is this group then, are they the folks who are dispatching Metro Transit's police force? Is that what it is, or is it the bus dispatchers?
I think it's the former. I don't think last. I was hearing they feel they have similar stresses to what, say Dar's been talking about. But we certainly can clarify that.
I think from our conversation with them, I think it was they were dispatching to the platforms, police force people, and it wasn't what is the bus group. It is they have people who cover sort of their area of lines, the bus platforms or different things.
I can actually clarify for you. Just a year ago, I worked at Metro Transit and worked very closely with their dispatch. So they're called supervisors, and they dispatch for both police and bus. They rotate. So there's not just police dispatchers. There's not just bus dispatchers. They rotate as staffing needs occur. And they do dispatch Metro Transit police. They receive 911 call transfers from the primary dispatch center, whether that's Minneapolis, County, Ramsey, whoever it is. And they dispatch officers wherever they need to go in the Twin Cities, whether that's a train platform or a bus stop, Brooklyn Center, Transit Center, Mall of America, whatever it is.
Can I ask you, do you think that that position is consistent with other positions in EF?
It's tricky because they do dispatch for both and they don't have just dedicated police. Hesitant to go down any evaluation role.
Okay, thank you.
So, good, I'm glad to jump in because it's right, you worked over there, so I have not worked there, I know who they are, and she's absolutely correct that wherever there's a transit station or a bus thing, so the gold line that just went to Washington County is now included, so Washington County PSAP, we get transfer calls to them to get their law enforcement out to any of the new gold line hubs that occur, so it's all of that they do. And yes, they have these cross things with the buses and Metro Transit. It's only in the last 5 or 6 years that they became a secondary PSAP, got on the 911 network so that they could have 911 calls transferred to them. But I see that opening up as the 911 network, and Leah could probably talk to this as well. I see them someday becoming a primary PSAP if routing occurs, that they can take calls from Metro Transit properties, then they would be a primary. So I think their roles are going to continue to expand, just like all the other PSAPs. Their roles and job descriptions and what we have to do is going to keep growing. So if not today, it would be tomorrow. But yes, I think their job description, would have to be evaluated under the MSRS plan. But I thought they definitely needed to be included. They needed to have their input. They know what they do today more than I do.
Thank you.
comments? We expect to revisit this one.
Or we can just proceed until I talk to the employers.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's probably, yeah. All right, we're gonna move. Oh, sorry.
I just was going to point out that under the definitions, number 5 for MSRS shouldn't say Community Corrections Services Regional Director. It's Field Services Regional Director. It'll just confuse things with para being Community Corrections and Field Services being.
So let me validate those titles. I took the operational compensation plan. So I can actually, I think I looked at the titles that we had in our database with respect to that. So that article came from. I need to qualify that at this point, those titles, we're hoping to follow what the counties are like amenable to with respect to titles. And I understand there is some nuance with respect to directors and the supervision that's included, but it sounds like some of those decisions have yet to be absolutely realized here. So that's why those are like, they're redlined specifically. Since we're looking at the memo, I just will add that you know, as far as the DOC is concerned, that an additional employer contribution for us is we just don't support that, and you know, I think everybody understands that we're in a deficit situation at the DOC, so additional contributions are prohibited for us. So that's a problem. And I do think that there's also the language about Part B, adding, you know, commissioner having the ability to add additional titles. So kind of depending on how this all shakes out. If there is an additional contribution, that might be something that we're willing to consider, but that's also something that might be a problem. They create some issues for us at the DOC. So I just wanted to be clear about where we were specifically with what's on here.
Thank you.
Anything else? Great. Number three, deciding new plan features and definitions for a new para administrative pension plan. And I believe that is what
Go about this, I think,
okay.
different ways. Doug and Amy have some information on withdrawal liability for us, so that's helpful to hear first, sort of before running through what you want to fire. We can see all those things. We can do that.
We really just have 4 slides total on withdrawal liability. This is, I think, an effort to capture some various conversations over the last few weeks that we've had. Maybe help to clarify a few things and answer questions about the amounts and how to pay for them and how much the payments could possibly be. So I'd like to start with the terminology clarifications, I think, in concept and stuff. So if we start on the left, well, scenario A, this is what, if we're just looking about this, the group that we're talking about, the potential new plan group. Within the general plan, there is a liability in that plan, which is the liability is measured as what are the assets that are needed to meet the future obligation for the benefits that have been earned. That's the liability. And there are assets in the plan. The assets have come from member contributions, employer contributions, and investment earnings. The plan does not have assets to cover the liability that's been earned. So there's an unfunded liability. That's the current situation for all active groups. In the new plan approach, none of that changes initially. Until we talk about, well, what, until there's agreed upon changes, but looking at the past service component, all of that, none of that changes. There's no change to the benefit that will ultimately be paid that's tied to past service, or when it will be paid, or how that liability is calculated. It still exists. And it's still not funded because the new plan doesn't create money. It's still an unfunded piece. The terminology is what changed. We call it a withdrawal liability. It's the same amount. It's the same as the unfunded liability that currently exists. And we started with the terminology of withdrawal liability because we've been talking about that at PARA for 8 years. We have language about withdrawal liability. It's a commonly used terminology that's used in multi-employer plans around the country. That's where the terminology comes from. But what the withdrawal liability really is, it's just what's the unfunded liability that currently exists for this. So that still exists. And if a new plan is created, that exists in the current general plan. And that concern is to make sure that that amount is funded, so it's not transferred and paid for by others. So that still exists in the general plan. In the meantime, a new plan is created and the new plan starts from scratch. Benefits are earned, benefits are funded. Hopefully those grow in tandem, and hopefully there's never an unfunded liability in that plan. There can be, but hopefully not. There's another possible approach, which is called a spin-off. This is not common in public sector from what we have. I've not seen it, but it is done in private practice when a business kind of splits into different pieces. But what it means would be is like, well, that liability and the assets for this group that are in the general plan, that would move over into the new plan. So everything for this group would be in the new plan. The entire obligation to pay their entire benefit, whether it's the past service piece or the future service piece, would be in the new plan. The assets that have accumulated for these members to date would transfer over, that'd be in the new plan. And since the assets aren't enough to meet that liability, there's an unfunded liability. It's the exact same number. Nothing has changed. It's just in a different location. So whether it's an unfunded liability that remains in the general plan that needs to be funded, or whether it's an unfunded liability that transfers over to the new plan, it needs to be funded. We're really talking about the same thing in all situations. Nothing changes. Similarly, if it's a sub-plan, it's a sub-plan within a group, that doesn't change it either. It's still the same liability, the same asset. So we've used some of this terminology, and I just wanted to kind of take the opportunity to try to hopefully clarify a few things. Any questions about this? Before we proceed.
Doug referenced the sub-plan. If you create a sub-plan, I understand that PARA doesn't do that like MSRS appears to be willing to do. If you had a sub-plan, do you have the benefit of having that larger group? If you're a sub-plan of the group, because that's the way it was kind of articulated to me from MSRS, is that you know, you have MSRS general, but now you have this subgroup. And the reason I brought it up is because, as you are probably aware, having been a member of the state patrol retirement plan, we always suffered by being in that smaller group, so we were more volatile than the larger groups. And it was kind of articulated that by being a sub-plan rather than a standalone group, it reduces some of that volatility. If I articulated it. Somebody else that was on that call could certainly chime in as well, but that's the way it was articulated. To me, the benefits of a sub-plan, because you still kind of get the benefit of the bigger overall, if that makes sense.
Well, I think the way I understand that, it sounds like a larger group in that situation is potentially subsidizing the smaller group, or the risk of the entire plan is the smaller group being protected from that risk because of the larger plan. You know, when we talk about a sub-plan pays out the exact same benefits in the future to all the same members, whether it's within the general plan, whether it's a new plan, nothing is changing about when those benefits are paid. Nothing changes with the assets. So whether it's a sub-plan, what we would do in a sub-plan at PARA is we would continue to value that group using the assumptions for that group, which would be remeasured from time to time. And we'd be adjusting the contribution requirements for that group based on their benefits and their experience. The experience, I mean demographic experience. So the process, the benefits in a sub-plan, the same as the benefits in the methodology to determine costs, same either way. It's really, from our perspective, there's really not a difference in how we're approaching that. Either the benefits or the costs for that.
So in your opinion, there is no true benefit to a sub-plan versus standalone?
I don't see the benefit. When we look at it, our preference for the standalone plan is really about the transparency of what's to make it really clear, like this is a plan that exists for this group. And the analysis of that plan going forward is for that group. And when that group, whenever there's a change to consider, it's really isolated and we know what's going on with that group. That's
I would also add, like, for a new plan, how you've seen our scorecard, right? We have, each plan has their priorities and the metrics that we use. Having a new plan allows us to focus on what those plan participants would need going forward and to identify priorities for that group. If it's a sub-plan, again, the larger plan may be taking risk, and so that's harder for us to identify priorities for that sub-plan.
in a way, really like at PARA, we could create one big plan for all of PARA and have a general plan, sub-plan, P-NET sub-plan, actual sub-plan. Same thing, it's just a preferred approach to being really transparent and clear about each group having their own communication.
The good and the bad, of course. Thank you.
Okay, the cost part. I don't know, it was our last meeting when we presented about withdrawal liability before. And I'm going to refer to it as unfunded liability here. Same thing, funded liability, withdrawal liability, same thing. We talked about different methods of, well, how do you calculate the amount? We talked about what's shown on here as method 1. This was in the study provided by Bonnie at GRS. So when they did the new plan study, and when they presented this to the group, they looked at if a new plan is created, what how much does the general plan no longer have to pay? New plan created, general plan doesn't have to pay future benefits. How much is that? It kind of relieves 212 million of liability from the general. But it also stops the contributions coming into the general. Look at that. What's the value of the future contributions that are coming into the general plan? That's $245 million. So the plan is no longer getting $245 million worth of contributions, no longer paying $212 million of liability. The general plan is $33 million worse off if this happens. That's the concern. The remaining general plan members and employers should not have to pay more or another group, because another group is choosing to have a different benefit plan. That's the purpose. So we talked about that $33 million. The other one we talked about, and I'm just presenting this in a little different way, is that it's a different way of thinking about the same thing, is that in the general plan, the total member and employer contributions are 14%, which is really 6.5% from the employees, 6.5% from the employer, plus an additional 1% from the employer. An additional 1% continues on until the plan is fully funded. So 14% of pay is coming in. 9% is needed for the normal costs. The normal cost is what active numbers are doing. Means the difference is 5%. That's what's going to pay for that unfunded liability. So if there's a new plan, the general plan loses 5% of pay to help pay that unfunded liability. When we look at that for, it'd be that's the amount that would be needed until the plan is fully funded. Now we did get an updated, we have a draft of our annual evaluation, and we have better news, with better progress towards full funding. Full funding is projected to occur 6 years from now, which is 4 years from the start date of this plan. So 4 years times 5% of pay times the payroll for this group, which is $191 million. Multiply that out, $38 million. Different way of looking at it. It's really not much of a surprise that it would be the same or comparable kind of number, because we're really always talking about it's the same unfunded liability for the group that needs to be paid. So, and then there's a third approach, which did not show last time we talked about it. And this approach is more consistent with what's currently described for withdrawal liability for privatizations. Privatizations in the general plan is any entity that goes private and leaves the para general. Same concept. If a group privatizes and leaves, we ask for them to pay for their share of the liability for their members. So there's a methodology for that. It's consistent with the methodology used for across the country, the multi-employer plans. I did ask Bonnie, our actuary, joining remotely, to want if they have questions for her, want to ask her. I asked her to double check my math on this. But it's under this measurement, the unfunded liability of the plan is about $1.45 billion. 2.27% is the new plan the percentage of people in the new plan versus the number of people in the entire plan. So it's kind of saying, well, what's the proportion of new plan to the total in the entire plan? The new plan people are 2.27% of the total plan, 2.27% of the unfunded liability, $33 million. So it shouldn't be too surprising that we're getting to a pretty consistent result. There's different ways of doing it. The third one is probably closer to what we actually see in actual practice, but conceptually, it's all about what is the cost unfunded liability for this. Questions? The last one, and the last one.
Cole's got a question.
Hi, sorry. I guess it's just a question that, well, everyone is gonna have this question who is listening or we're reporting back to. The plan that we proposed last year, would that have had a similar unfunded liability? Because we're just hearing about this for the first time, the unfunded liability around this table. Would that old plan or that plan we introduced to the legislature have had that same issue? Thank you.
In scenario 1 and 3 there, because you're calculating, last time you talked about the 33 million, and you said you have the new news of the, the positive, going to happen 6 years sooner on the funding, on the fully funded aspect of it, I guess. But that, because of how you're calculating it, that didn't change. Even with that new information, it didn't reduce the 33 million based on how it's calculated or something. It doesn't come into play.
Right. It doesn't change that first one. The first one. So it's really just very prospective, looking at the future benefits and future contributions.
So Nicole, you asked whether the bill had the unfunded liability issue, the withdrawal liability that they're talking about?
Correct.
The bill.
The bill, which was the plan that the group proposed to the legislature last year.
Right. Okay, so there is no leaving to go to a new plan in that case. It was going to be paid for by the employees, remember? So I don't see that there would be a withdrawal liability in that context. The same plan, right? Remember the bill? It was going to happen within the plan.
I think I heard the question as the same issue exists. And so I was thinking about it as a new plan, but if it wasn't, right, if it's not a new plan, that unfunded still exists. Remember, we have to pay.
But it's like, it's not like anybody. So as long as it's in the same plan, there is unfunded. We all know that, but nobody's got to pay for that unfunded liability when we went with that benefit structure that was in the bill. So,
I
that just increase
they
the
are
multiplier and lower the retirement age in the para plan, general plan.
Yeah, they are paying for it. So the 14% is a 14% total contribution required in that plan. 5% of that is because we have to pay for it, because everyone has to pay for that.
Right, but there's no sort of payment event, if you don't have a new plan. It's like everybody, we all have to pay for that, right? But
if there's no new plan, everyone will have to continue to pay that extra amount to help pay for that.
And if I can add, if you're creating a sub-plan, right, those contributions are directed towards those new benefits, not directed towards the current unfunded liability.
the bill did not have.
I know, but like, when we're talking about sub-plans, that's the issue why it's still, the unfunded liability exists there, right? Because all those new contributions are being directed towards that benefit, not back into the
But again, Bill didn't have. To be clear what that bill is,
And that's actually where, if I understand what you're saying, right, is part of the reason there would be an unfunded withdrawal is because of the fact that the people that would be staying in the old part of the plan. So I'm just gonna use, for example, I'll say me, right? So I have 32 years in the old plan and 5 years in the new plan. I'm leaving the old plan and not contributing to that plan anymore, and so that plan doesn't have those contributions anymore, and I contribute to the new plan at that 5-year rate. Well, in our proposal last year, we were staying and continuing to contribute, and we were increasing our contribution. So that would have covered that cost, and we wouldn't have been leaving, plus we would have had our assets.
Stacking that on top.
So that percentage would have covered all of those costs, and it would have been.
I just want to clarify for folks, the plan that we brought forward last year was, we were creating a new plan. There were issues, that's why we all are here today. We never got to the point where we had the conversation about the unfunded liability. And so I don't think it's something that we all contemplated as part of that plan, and that's, so we're learning so much right now. And so just wanted to clarify that.
But if all of the years of service moved, the unfunded liability wouldn't be there.
It will move if we go back to the first slide.
Because they wouldn't be collecting out of the old plan anymore, so that unfunded liability for our plan members would no longer be there.
Well, no, it would be there. So if you have, in the general plan, there's a promise to pay benefits for your 32 years of past service. A promise to pay. And there's a liability to the plan to cover that. If the assets aren't sufficient to pay for your 32 years of benefits. So if you move entirely to the new plan and assets move over, it's not enough assets to pay for your 32 years of service, whether that stays in the current plan or if that's all moved to the new plan. So you have to still pay for the part you earn. And by you, I don't mean you. If someone,
Use me as an example.
yeah, someone needs to pay for the part you've already earned that hasn't been funded, and then pay for the additional benefits that are being sought in the new plan. So whether your past service stays in the old plan, or whether your past service moves to the new plan, there's not enough assets to cover it either way. It needs to be funded either way.
like, now, would you move on to scenario C and just talk about how that fact has no impact on anybody in terms of having to pay more right up front?
Well, yeah, so let's just hypothetically say there's going to be no change in benefits. We're just going to keep all the same multiplier, same age reductions for early retirement, everything's the same. You can say that. But hypothetically, if this group says, but we want our own plan, same benefits, we want our own plan. Well, then we could say, okay, we can move all your benefits over to that new plan, and we will move your share of assets over to that plan, but your assets aren't enough to cover it. You'll have an unfunded, you'll have a new plan, same benefits, you have the same unfunded over there that you have already in the existing. So you could create a new plan for this group, same benefits, that have an unfunded liability that would need to be funded there.
Right, but then that's great, right? Then we put in a new benefit structure that we're talking about. And we're gonna have, more going in. We're just like in the general plan, we got an unfunded liability, we're gonna keep paying it off for as long as it takes, 2031. Great outcome. Then they don't have to pay additional employee contributions, right? Under the scenario C, to me looks like a great solution to the problem of how do employees now pay more to kill off the unfunded liability, right?
They'd be
Really clever and really great, right?
great. But yeah, the main point is, it's the same amount that needs to be paid, and it can be paid off with the same methodology. If everything moves over. And on the last slide kind of covers that, there's not a lot. Last slide, which is that if you, and most of this was covered before, which is the key, the punchline here is you go down to the third bullet point and say, well, right now in the general plan, the unfunded liability is being paid off until the year 2048. If you just keep that same methodology, move it to the new plan, pay it off over the same period, it's 1.1% of payroll. That is
So that increases the employee contribution rate, just to be clear. I just want this clear for this group. So that is definitely the way to pay it down, but if you do scenario C, no increase in employee contribution rate, because they're gonna pay it off over time.
if you do scenario C, as long as they're saying, like, if you're just creating a new plan, but it's the same benefits,
Yep.
then you'd have the same contributions for the same period of.
When you say same benefit, sorry, what is, like, what do you mean? I just, when you say that.
Yeah, we're talking about the same multiplier, the same post-retirement increases, same retirement age, same reductions. Yeah, everything's the same.
One is that we put in this better structure, we put it in the new plan. Prospectively, they will pay more for the new multiplier if they want it and new lower retirement age. But the point is that they pay for that with the employee contribution rate increase, not the unfunded liability. Because it's now in there. I know they will keep paying because they have to pay, 5% or whatever, but the point is it's not new, right? It's not layering in 1.1 to make the employee contribution rate now not just 4%, but 5%.
Hopefully this makes it clear that if you are talking about, like, okay, now we're gonna add benefits, and here's the cost to add the benefits, it's on top of the existing.
Exactly.
So what you're saying is if creating that new plan doesn't allow for a change in age of retirement. If you change the age of retirement, then that adds.
Then you're adding costs.
Okay, so that doesn't work for this plan then. Right? I mean, if you have to have all the same benefits, we've wasted a lot of time sitting around a table.
No, but yeah, the way I would see it though, is what you're essentially saying is you're saying the new plan is gonna be a combined plan in and of itself. So we move our old service over into the new plan as a sub-plan. So it's itself, and then we have our new stuff on top of that.
We have new stuff on top, that's students at cost.
Right. So the old stuff stayed where it was, the same cost it was before. And our new stuff has a cost.
Another way to look at her service plans, like all your benefits are to this point are under this set of parameters, and then your benefits going forward are under the new cycle benefits. So, because everyone is equally treated in that instance, that's what's more of a tier sub plan, because a sub plan is you have a plan and you have different groups getting different things, it's more of a tier, because you have all people getting the same. Anyway. And impacting all membership is more.
That I'm confused now, and so I thought I heard Susan say that nobody has to pay 1.1. It would be, so let's say it costs you 5% more for the enriched benefit. It is another 1.1 on top of that in order to fund the unfunded withdrawal liability, whatever we call it.
And eventually like that, the unfunded liability taken care of with different ways. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but this plan C idea allows us a little bit more flexibility with like contributions, figuring that out and directing things where it needs to go. For example, you could have it where the employer contribution, the general plan is set up right now, that the employer has a finite like a 6.5% contribution, and then you have a 1% contribution towards the unfunded liability. You could have it set up in a similar circumstance where for the portion that the member, for the time that we have an unfunded liability in this plan, 1% of that contribution is being directed towards that. But still in the plan, right? And then when you get to that unfunded liability being taken care of, you retain still that 7.5% contribution, unlike the general plan where it goes down. Right, like I think there's a little bit more flexibility for us to kind of go back and look at what the numbers are actually looking like. And I do want to say, someone has asked me if there was precedent for this, and I did make this connection to earlier today. Minneapolis, when Minneapolis merged into Para, they were assessed a unfunded liability that they continue to pay to us today. So there is a practice of this existing in the general plan.
So I'm a bit confused as well. If you were to look at your tentative proposal A, that was estimated to be 1.64% increase to make those changes, as I recall. Not this document, the previous one here, this document here. Let's see it. So if I'm understanding this correctly, if we take 1.64 plus this 1.1% of payroll, that would be amortized out to 2048, would we then in this plan have an increase to the employee of 2.74%, or am I wrong? Am I misunderstanding?
I think that's right. You're just adding on the 1.1 from what you saw. What you saw before was the cost of the improved benefits.
We want that.
It was not including the fact that existing benefits haven't been fully funded yet. Additional.
So in the ballpark then for just for this group's understanding that if we were to go forward, this liability is about 1.1% if we're successful having it treated or amortized to 2048 plus what tentative A was 1.64, so about 2.7. I mean, the group's target was around 2%, but again, I don't think we want to let perfect get in the way of good here. If that's what it takes to advance this forward, but my brain's smoking a little all these different proposals, so imagine I'm not alone here today. Thank you.
I'm gonna try not to throw a wrench in it.
Oh, here we go.
I just want to be clear that when you say that our assets and our unfunded liability will move, that does not mean that we then get all our years of service in the new plan, correct?
You get it under the general plan provisions, not under the new plan.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure that that's
Great
clear.
clarification.
But it technically is under a new plan.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, so it's like tier 1 before this, pays the multipliers, this tier 2 before this.
Right, so accessing that will still cost you the reduction, but it's housed in the new plan rather than in the old.
Yeah.
Okay, to make you.
There's one, I think one more important thing to say there, is that. Again, whether the past service stays in the general plan, the new service is new plan. Or whether it's all in the new plan. Again, it doesn't change the benefits. Yeah. There is going to be a risk and reward element too, that if the assets go over, if the assets beat the assumption, the cost of the new plan goes down. If the assets don't beat the assumption, cost of the new plan goes up. So it's different. It's different than if you're just doing a new plan from scratch where you start with 0 assets and 0 liability. So
Speaking on behalf of corrections agents statewide, we tend to excel. So I think we'll be okay.
Doug, is there any implications if you have a majority of the folks purchasing past service credit and spending money and it's invested in plan, is it not? If people purchase.
if when we've talked about it, we've talked about the past service purchases, if they are based on an actual equivalence basis, then it's a plan neutral thing. They will be paying for an increased benefit, which increases the liability. But what they're paying is the comparable values of the assets go up by the same. So that would be keep the plan neutral. If that's how the past service purchases.
So I think we're understanding your explanation a little bit better, at least I am, but how does somebody access these 2 different tiers of retirement? Does somebody access one tier at age 60 and the other tier at 66? Is, you know, let's dive into that, or is that a question?
I think we can set up where like, the same, CSA law. I think we can have it where like you can't take benefits at different times under CSA. I think the intent here is not to change, the access that members, the benefit that members have access to. There we go. And so we have to set it up that way, but that intent would be that where you could, if you're gonna do CSA, for example, you could take your benefits at age 60 and then wait until 61 to draw the judgment in. To one, I don't know. The goal would be that your experience stays the same, how you can access the benefits.
It has to be within a year.
That's CSA law. Or you could do coverage by more than one fund, right? Which then allows you to defer your benefit to, but your high five would apply to the general plan benefit. There is the coverage by one fund.
Is there any flexibility in that, Amy? I mean, that legislation can do for the people that we didn't have to access, we could leave that stuff till 66, but access or 60 if we chose to leave. I mean, is there any flexibility?
Coverage by more than one fund offers you that flexibility right now. The difference is that your high five wouldn't apply to your general plan benefit. That's the big difference there. I would apply that. No, for coverage by more than one fund, your years of vesting service is what applies. Your high five for the general plan portion is will be locked in as that. And then for the new plan, whatever high five you had in the new plan will be locked in like that. You could take your new plan benefit and defer your general plan benefit until age 60. Under CSA, if you want the highest high five to apply to both benefits, you have to take that within 12 months.
Unless we do mixed service, which is something we've been talking about.
Mixed service leads to a larger conversation with para about what all of our members have access to.
So, I'm sorry. So the coverage by more than one plan works for people who are close to retirement and aren't expecting that their high five is going to change a lot, because it locks in your high five. And if you're not going to get a bunch of raises in the next 3 years, it's about the same amount, right? Okay.
that's something each individual needs to do when they come have that conversation.
Yeah, so what we do at Paris, we give you estimates, right? And like show you like, okay, here's what a CSA benefit looks like. Here's what a coverage by more than one fund benefit looks like. We give you right to those examples. Estimates. And we also do like different retirement ages, right?
If we build this in tiers, that we can still utilize both of those. Yes.
Going over your last page. All right, so. So I don't feel like we got through all of this. Figure out what the plan features to be finalized are. You just want to start at the top and go down, or how do you guys want to? Yeah, we have, does everybody have a copy of the menu?
Of the agenda. And so the one column in the, all that seat heading, one to the left of the left thing. That is the one that this is all of the features that we received from, I think it was in a poll, in a memo that you had worked through with your stakeholders that you were talking with. It is more than 2% the DAR we're talking about. So there needs to be some decision about whether, you know, the multiplier is going to be within this chart, result in a 3% increase or something less. So that telecommunicators and probation will have the same benefit structure here, or whether we run separate benefits for telecommunicators. So that the thought here is that we need to figure out what the multiplier is going to be, and it really drives the question of how much are you willing to pay.
I guess, you know, when I look at the multiplier, for the MSRS general is now 1.9, yes? And the presentations that we've heard to date, you know, we're trying to get at, was it trying to accomplish like 80% in retirement kind of thing? I've been curious to try and get more of an understanding when that was set at 1.9. You know, when you have all these, the general plans and the public safety plans all set at their different rates, and it makes sense to me that at an earlier age, you need a higher multiplier rate to get, you know, to get to a livable amount in retirement. If you're talking was the 1.9 when it's set for the MSRS general, and then if we do a new plan, if we do 1.9, does that keep, I mean, obviously it's less money, right? If you're going earlier, if you're going at 60 and not begin that 1.9 until 66, what's the understanding of how does it help you? Are you at a livable percent? You know, as a 1.9 versus a 2. That's 2, but maybe para, but MSRS and para.
Yeah. So I think there's a number of this question, which is, you know, what's your replaceable depending on the percentage. And I don't have those figures. I think it sounds like what you want is those exact figures.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what I thought, at least with the para calculations, I think from our past presentations, wasn't there some analysis of at what multiplier rate it would get you that? And you were looking at the 2.2 or the 2 or the 1.9.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I have the answer. We did present replacement ratios with the different multipliers. I'm only seeing the 1.7 and then the 2.2. And so when we had that conversation with the 2.2, I think from my understanding from this, please correct me if I'm wrong, 2.2 is too much, right? And so that led to with Social Security, a replacement ratio of close to 100%, right? And so if we did a ratio or
Yeah, you did find that,
yeah, can you?
yeah.
Great. And then I'm gonna let Todd talk about it.
September 4th.
It might be under the CSA stuff. If you're looking at September 4th. Be where it got out. Yeah.
And then it's first one. I've done that stuff.
Maybe sure. Screen. Alina, I have all of these slides in one slide deck. I can send you.
Oh, July 31st. Okay, so let's go down to pick the last one, scenario 4. Okay, let's stop there. All right, so I mean, this looks like it's a 2% multiplier. So this is showing 35 years in new plan, entirely in the new plan. 35 years of service at a 2% multiplier. And this was unreduced at 62. So this is like the one. I mean, I don't know if we had one that was getting close to, but unreduced at 60. Go down to the next one, scenario B. Okay, maybe that one. So,
Yeah, this is.
so this has unreduced at 60 with a 2% multiplier. So a 35-year career with someone at 70% of pay plus 20% from Social Security and starting at the earliest Social Security age. If you believe 80% is a good recommendation, that's close in the first two. So they, 60, 61, they don't have Social Security yet. They have to fill that gap from something else, savings. Then just if it was a 1.9% multiplier, it would drop the software a bit.
And is that the mark that with the other MSRS or paraplans or MSRS plans that are people 80%? Is that kind of the standard industry to what to shoot for in combo with your Social Security? And when you have a group, the law enforcement that do not have Social Security, there's still, are all those things generally targeting 80%?
I put that out there. This is not Para's recommended ratio. It's the red line. That's financial planners will probably tell you something in the 80%. They might say 75, 80, 85, whatever. It's going to depend on your lifestyle and all that. But it's usually somewhere around 80 because when you retire, you no longer have your pension plan contribution, which is going to be, well, in this case, 89% of pay. You no longer contribute to Social Security, 6% of pay. I mean, that takes you from 100 100% down to 85 right there. And then typically the financial planners, I've heard over many years, oftentimes your house is paid for, kids are out of the house. You know, that kind of thing. It's not going to count for lifestyle if you want to do a lot of traveling. But that's where the recommendation comes from. So personally, like I would view this as saying, well, if the goal is to have someone have a lifestyle reasonably close to after retirement, close to before retirement, and they put in a full career at this plan, this should be pretty good.
Would just add that when we talk about this at MSR, so we're really talking about it typically is 60% of your income. And then whatever else you need to make up the house, that's you're gonna do. We're not usually figuring out Social Security. We talk about it. And when we're looking at the general plan, we're looking at a 30 to 35-year career and getting to around 60% of your income. Those are the numbers at the top, typically. Not, like I said, figuring Social Security, which if you're going to age 65, 66, then you're probably getting close to 1%. So that's typically how we talked about it. And we have not, I've not been part of any kind of in-depth conversations looking at earlier retirement, which is where they're still coordinating with Social Security, like the state patrol plan. That's just not.
You show if you go up a few earlier, we talked about in our general plan that if the general plan person does work the full career to the unreduced, one more. There. All right, I'm looking at a different set of stuff, I think. But we've shown this before, like, you know, in the general plan currently, if someone works until the normal retirement age of 66 and has a full career and takes Social Security at a full Social Security retirement age, so they're at 100% placement, which is better. I mean, that's, again, with no further contribution requirements, you probably have more disposable income after retirement.
So if one were to do the new plan and do like a 2 multiplier and so forth, and compare the age 66 versus the 60, the 66 people would still have 20% more, figuring in the factoring in the Social Security rate.
Yeah, it would be
100%.
It'd be another, yeah, so.
I guess that's just my, as we're discussing the multiplier rate, if we go down to too low of a multiplier, we're dropping off of what people were expected to live off of at the full retirement age of 66. I'm not so good with all this number stuff, but.
And I know that like there was some documentation provided by Aaron and MSRS that talked about when they modified the multiplier from 1.7 to 1.9, that was equivalent of 1% of pay. So obviously when you increase the multiplier, that's got a cost to it. I'm not certain if the multiplier or the increased cost would be exactly the same for para. That was an MSRS estimate, obviously different set of demographics and whatnot, but obviously that has a cost implication too. I didn't say anything.
I don't look.
Can I ask a question? I heard Cole, Jim, and the probation folks. We were talking here about the chart you were showing was a pre-proposal of 62 retirement. You saw the purchasing power because those 2 years go well beyond 8. Multiplier in the context of your priorities, it feels like the multiplier is lower than the retirement age of 60, which I've heard multiple meetings don't move up. Does the 61 buy us any more purchasing power of benefit and a reduction of that total plan cost liability? So it's not like what we were saying before of 1.64 plus a 1.1, which is over Dar's amount that she's kind of put at 2. Does a 61 get us to a plan liability that's lower and a total
And I don't know because we haven't asked our actuary to run the numbers at 62 based on the discussion we did on.
And sorry, not 62, but 61.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking 60, we're gonna ask for 62 because we could interpolate to 61 if we wanted to, but we didn't ask for a different retirement age because of this way the discussion is going. So we've kind of been hanging on to that one more scenario to value. The actuary itself, but I don't know what. MSRS might have had that.
One more time, if I could just get clarification. If we draft a bill so that there's transfer of assets and liabilities unfunded liability to the new plan. We pay benefits, just like the general plan. That date. And then we add on this new benefit structure. Don't have to add 1.1% to the increase in the employee contribution rate. We just increased the employee contribution by the amount needed to pay for the new benefits. Okay, good. Let's go. That's the way we'll do it. Because why not, right?
But, I said, okay, for our tax council, doing that approach, we think logical, makes sense, but there doesn't seem to be a precedent of that having been done in the country with companies. Talk about it, you know. Yeah. And
So you legally can't do that, or?
no, it's just, no, it's not. I mean, we wouldn't have brought it forward if we didn't think like this is a possibility to be able to do. And it's done in the private world all the time. And it's really just a kind of question of how do you do it, how do you get that? I don't see a reason why you can't, but we need to be mindful of specific rules. We are very careful and we follow the advice of our tax council. We don't want to do anything at all that's going to risk a tax qualification issue to the new plan or the general plan. So details to make sure, conceptually, it seems like it should be.
So when would you be able to? I feel like we're getting close. Maybe not here. But when would you be able to give us close answer? I got you.
We have a meeting scheduled for November 17th, right?
You already asked council. You got the okay on that.
Well, we have to look at the details, right? We have to work out, like, the idea itself passes the smell check, right? But there are details that we have to work out to make sure that we're still working it, because this is unique and there's not a lot of precedent for us to go up. It's, the concept is good.
They didn't say no, right? They didn't say no, and they would.
And they would, yeah.
You know, they have a lot of expertise. They seem. So I think they are kind of going like, yeah.
I mean, my issue is that we have to make decisions about these things. We've got to get to the finish line. So let's set that aside. Let's say no withdrawal liability bump up on the employee contribution rate. Let's just figure out what do you guys want and what do you guys want? Can we go with 2% or 3% increase? That'll drive what you're gonna do for your retirement age and multiplier, right?
Right, and I'm ready.
Go for it.
Okay, so if we're working down with what the list here, the first thing I do want to say that at this point, we're not asking the employers to put anything more forward. And so we really don't want to consider 61. 60 is where we're at, but we'd be willing to go to the 1.9 multiplier on it, if that helps get closer to where DAR is at.
Yes, I definitely 60, and Mike and I, have been talking over the last couple of weeks since our last meeting too, and we were refreshed by some of the material from the 21-22 pension study working group that we have that MSRS provided. That because they know who the people are in their plan, where not because of the types of stuff we're para, we never knew how many were actually in there. And by the numbers that Erin provided us, she said the average retirement age for a telecommunicator in MSRS was 59. And I think that just really proves my folks don't make it past the age of 60. They just don't. And so, yes, 60. And I just think economically with, money and everything that's going on today, 2% is where I'm at today. I don't think I could, it's my folks to take on more of a draw from their pay, the 2%. So I'm hoping we can get 60, that 1.9, or at 2%. And, Para and Doug and Amy, I'm grateful. I'm grateful you found this option 3. Very grateful that you guys put your heads together and said, what else can we do to bring to the table to make this work for our.
That's one of the columns here. I believe it's the third one.
All right.
Left. Yeah.
All right.
So we got a 1.9 multiplier.
That's where we do it. COLA.
What you want for the COLA? 1 point. What do you want, Doug?
Mike, he's brain on that one.
I defer to Doug, what do you recommend
That's probably
Sorry. Nicole, Doug, the highlighted section there on the screen. What do you recommend, this group?
I'll jump in just for a second. The talk is 1.75, but fixed, not tied to Social Security. And I don't know if Para has costed out on your cost menu of benefits when it's not tied to Social Security, what that cost is, or do you know?
We do. Whether you do fixed or the formula, you can find, you can determine your cost and you can choose either the fixed or the formula. And the difference is the formula can get you higher or lower than the fixed amount, depending on what inflation really goes. It's costed up the same. So, and we had that on that matrix that we had before. I mean, Para prefers the inflation-based methodology. So that's preference. I'd say if you've identified your cost target, the part that you can start low and increase if things go well in the future, it's easier to do that with the inflation part, the annual increase part. You can start at the lower end and go, okay, things go well, plan. It's easier to ratchet that up prospectively. Whereas it's harder to do that on the multi. Equitably is, particularly since this group, the new plan there's not going to be a large amount of retirement benefit tied to the health term increases early on. So that's just what I'm saying is like, if we're looking to try to hit a target, go with the lower annual increase, try to get there. And I'm not, right now, I'm kind of working through the numbers myself about what it is. All that really fits in.
See there, I think you had said that the assumption you use 1.5 when you do the adjustable COLA, so So I think that's why stay within the early 2%. If we go with the adjustable, because you assume you can assume 1.5. So you, Nicole, get it, if you use the adjustable and you have a 1.75 max, the actuary assumes 1.5, so it's cheaper than going with 1.75 fixed. So you might stick closer to the 2% here in terms of rate increase.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of stuck because that was one of the decision points that we had said was the 1.75 fixed for 1% minimum, 2% max. So that's kind of stuck there. I don't know that I can speak to that without.
So you go 1.75 fixed, it'll be more than 2%. Okay.
If I look on here, though, if you look at the annual increase assumption, 1.9 and 1.75, but you had an 8.6, is that more than the 2%?
2.1.
Oh, yeah.
That's fine. 2.1.
But the 1.75 does work.
As a fix. Is that what you're doing here?
According to that, yes.
Is that right? So, yeah, do that. Yeah. So
No, go ahead.
I do think, just I want to pause the conversation. I like that we're making decisions. Decisions are great, but we do need time to like just run the numbers to make sure that the numbers are working. Before we have final agreement. I don't like that Doug is doing paper math here.
Yeah.
And expecting like this is gonna cover everything. And I appreciate Susan, the need to make decisions, and that's great. We can have like, here's what we're looking at. Let us go do the numbers and come back, and we can email it out and have another meeting next week to look at it, but we do need time to make sure the numbers are working and not just working out metrics.
I would speak to that, because I think that coming to an agreement, but once the rubber hits the road, that's what the real, like, when you guys put in all the information, it comes back. It's way cheaper than we thought it was.
We never do that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like competitive here. What do you cost out, right? So we're trying to get some baseline.
Yeah.
You go back, run the numbers, come back, and then we adjust.
Okay.
For no numbers, you don't have anything to run, right? Just want to make
Yeah,
it.
two pieces that I'm struggling like to just factor in right now. Is withdrawal liability conversation that's not built into this matrix. But also, we learned quite a ways back when Bonnie presented the costs. The cost is expected to decline over time. And so it's possible that you can have a smallish initial funding deficiency if you know that it's going to turn around, or you believe it's going to turn around and become a funding sufficiency. So, in other words, you don't want to fixate totally on just what's on this matrix because it's changing in a favorable way over time. So I like this. I think it's good. I like that we can go back and we should do this. We should say, okay, what does this look like? 1.9% multiplier, unreduced to 60, 2% contribution, 1.75% fixed. Talk to our tax council, make sure that we're on track on that. Come back and say, all right, this is how it all looks now. This can see. And so it's good. I'm getting cautious because I don't want to like.
Can I just ask, Doug, when you're saying that things might come back more favorable, are you saying that somehow we should be leaving some space differently? Does your mind go to, we should be doing something a little bit differently or consider something a little differently that can capture that favorability if it's coming back, or is that just, hey, years out, it's that, yeah, the numbers worked out, the investments worked out, or was there something different you were implying with that?
Well, I think it's balancing the risk a little bit. So, remember when the actuary does the work and GRS, Bonnie did the work, it's based on a lot of assumptions. And we don't have a lot of good information about the assumptions for this group. So all these numbers are based on the best assumptions we have. So there's some potential risk that can change one way or the other. And when GRS presented this, they said, this is the initial cost because they have to value the current group. And as that group, as more and more new hires come in under the new plan, that cost is expected to come down. So there's a few things to balance, and I think again, it'll be good to like look at one scenario, come back like look at one scenario, what are all the things we look at? Because it may be that you would say, okay, we are okay starting with a plan that we aren't funding adequately right now because we're expecting in 3 years it'll be enough, and thereafter it'll be enough. Or you could look at it and say, well, if we're concerned, well, what happens if the market goes bad? What does that do? So we have these things to lay out.
I just need to add, I left off 4 words, 5 words on my 1.75 fixed. Until 98% funded and then 2%.
By 98, not 100%.
Because 98% is considered 100% in actuarial world. Doug taught me that, right? Yes.
So 98%, that's in the general plan. When the general plan, post-term increases were increased last year, we changed the threshold that where the 1% triggers off, the 1% employer. That'd be a 98%.
Yeah, I understand we change when we get to when we're enhancing benefits to 98%, but I didn't know that means the plan is 100 actuarially of 100% funded. This is what Nicole said. And is that a parapension principle that really 100% is the effective funding ratio of these plans? We're supposed to get to 98%.
So we've never set a specific metric for what the goal is, other than just want to achieve and maintain around 100%. So we're going to have volatility.
From an employer perspective, we've had concerns for 2 reasons. One, these plans in my lifetime and others have not been 100% funded. 2, we have funding in the parent general plan. We've been subsidizing a higher employer contribution rate with the promise that will go down when it gets to a certain point, and that's been tinkered with. Obviously, in this plan, we're talking about offering a constant 7.5% without the trigger. But the policy principle of having plans be 100% fully funded before we tinker with enhanced benefits is something that at least my group cares deeply about, especially given that we don't know that COLA contributions for increases is the preferred methodology of what's a benefit. Certainly for retirees, that makes sense. But what about the actives of ours who are taking home pay, dealing with childcare expenses in the thousands of dollars? So I would caution that move a little bit.
Yeah. There's another challenge to that kind of approach. Many of the statewide plans used to have that kind of mechanism, a trigger mechanism that when the plan reaches the funding, it'll create a higher quote. The actuarial challenge is that, well, if you think it's going to happen, you have to build in the costs. Now that changes your funding ratio. It's a circular problem. And so all the statewide funds moved away from that approach before a triggered, an approach that's triggered on the funding ratio. So certainly understand the intent and the desire to want to increase in that future, and it can be done, but if it's built into the plan, the actuary has to build in the cost of the plan. And that would kind of create this up. So effectively, it's like you have to build the cost in, right?
Then I have a follow-up question. I really thought we were making progress. So if it's a fixed 1.75 and the plan is healthy and the projections look great because all of us old expensive people are off the books and the plan is healthier, does that impact the COLA's ability to change then?
Yeah, you can go to the.
And that would be something that
You go
this
to the
group could come back.
legislature.
Okay.
And you come back and.
Much like we did with the general plan. That's just the same.
Might do what MSRS did and say that a COLA, we like the multiplier group to say the multiplier is more meaningful for us. We had a 1.9 here. We went a 2.0 or 2.1. So it would be your decision to say, again, assess the interest curve of what is more meaningful.
We also increased the COLA with the multiplier.
Yeah.
So it could be that.
And here we have, with our board has put as a priority with all our plans to not just connect it to inflation, but raise that cap. And that's the highest priority, and that's what the board has supported efforts that are focused more on that.
And so what are the risks of a fixed annual COLA?
Well, I give the pair perspective, is that if you have a fixed, okay, people will know what they're gonna get. Okay? That acknowledge that. But you're gonna have periods, high inflation, and you have periods of low inflation. And then you're gonna have generations of people that if they retire in periods of high inflation, they're not gonna keep up. If you have periods of low inflation, those will. So it's a different impact of generation to generation. We advocate for tying it as much as we can to inflation, because then their benefits move for inflation. So we do that as more equitable across generations. Now, I would acknowledge that until we can keep getting that cap higher, until then, we're not getting much difference in those results. It's not significant difference. But when we moved to this approach in 2018, we had the opposite, take 1.25% fixed or have it be inflation based. And from 2018 to 2025, the cap applied all but 2 years. So it worked to the advantage of the retirees because we're in a high inflation environment. Someday down the road, we could be in a low inflation area, which has happened. You go back 10 years ago and there's years with back-to-back inflation. Now, I would say, if I'm advocating for a retiree group, let's say 10 years from now, inflation is really low. The plan isn't doing well. There could be scrutiny. Why are we giving inflation increases when there is no inflation? So if it's inflation based, that doesn't happen. You can make the argument, retiree groups would make the argument, like, hey, this is tied to inflation. And inflation's low, so we didn't get much of an increase, but I'm okay with that because inflation's low. And I think it'd be harder for legislature to reduce inflation-based post-retirement increase than it is to reduce a fixed. This is all my being pretty strong supporters of that inflation-based approach. And since putting it in 2018, and wait a long time before we had the opportunity in the general plan to crank it up a bit. You know, it took a while, But that's the intention, is to kind of keep working that up. So it's a real long-term commitment to get it to where it's a wider gap between the minimum and the maximum, so more currently high inflation. That's.
So- When you're costing out the stuff next week, can you give us the fixed or the mixed approach? Okay, so we would have an answer then after seeing that.
We agreed that normal retirement age is 60. Is that what we can call the line here? What about the early retirement age?
We've been told that that doesn't really impact any financial things, so
Yeah, yes, that's right. And as long as it's done on an or the equivalent reduction factor, which is how the general plan works.
Perfect. Employer contribution rate, no increases, like at 7.5.
As long as it stays at what they said, where it's gonna continue.
And I appreciated Nicole's way of saying this is an increase of 1% of what our statutory responsibilities are in general. So that is what we're bringing to the table. I don't know if I'm just being fair.
Are we doing MSRS right now?
I think
You may want to like hold up.
Employer contribution or employee contribution rate.
We're at 2.1 right now.
But based on what Doug said, maybe stick 2 because
We'll see where it's at next week when he comes back. I would put 2.1 down right now and then we'll see what it comes back at.
Okay.
Because that's.
2.1 more.
Can I
Yeah.
share, can I ask one question? So when you said the mix, either the static 175 or the mixed, is your mixed option the floating to the level of inflation up to what percent?
With the normal, or with the
1.5
actuarial equivalent, right, of saying the same amount?
this, the COLA
Yeah,
following what,
inflation is
yes.
up until what's the cap for your.
What was on that chart too?
It was based on Doug's saying it was the one, if it was 1.75 fixed, it's the 1.75 assumed, yes?
Well, you know, we don't know. We have to find out what that is. So the question is like, what does a 1.75% fixed translate to the formula? And it's gonna be, I can say it's gonna be somewhere between a 1.75% max and a 2.5% max. I don't know where it falls in. It's not an easily interpolated number. It's an actuary, especially for our actuary that I'll go back and see.
And we were at Para Generals at 1.5 until recently. It's
Yeah.
now, until recently it was 1.5, now we're up to 1.75. So even if, would we even phrase it different, if we're not doing the mix, would we also just want to put these things, maybe you drill this into my mind, uniformity matters, pension principle. We don't want all plans getting different COLAs or different structures of COLAs. Would you also suggest that it's floating inflation up to 175? Like the general plan is right now. And if the group does want to pay for additional COLA, is that okay with you guys? I don't know what it will be for us, I'll ask our folks, but if the group does, the COLA's group wants to go to 2.5 or that floating at fixed rate, is that something you think the parent would be okay with?
Or if you looked at, if it was mixed, I'd say we'd be looking at a 2% max.
Can I just ask for my clarity? Mixed, can you remind me what mixed is?
inflation adjust.
Inflation, so like
Formula.
Para's preferred preference is the inflation projection. That's what we're calling.
That's what
mixed.
works, yeah, that's what
Okay,
makes.
I just wanted to make sure I was
1
under.
to 2, like a 1 minimum, 2 max
Yeah, okay,
variable or a 1.75.
yeah, I mean, plans, to your point, Matt, like, you know, the structure for the COLA, the min and the max, we want for all plans, right? Fort Benham doesn't have it yet, right? Because we can't get them to this level yet where we can put that in, right? So I think if we can have that structure, that's great. And then the COLA itself, like the mins and max are gonna depend on the plans.
Because right now, I think according to your chart here, the correctional plan para is 100% CPI, 1% minimum, 2.5 max, which has an assumption of 2%. According to your chart, yep. I mean, obviously, this is not that same group, but
So, or if we went to a 1 to a 2, it would charge us 1.75, which is what we were asking for anyway.
And it's like connected to.
Then I think I heard that we're okay with the combined service annuities.
Where are we with this? If it's CSA or mixed service, that's two different things. I don't know where Pear falls on that. Yeah, if it's mixed service.
Which one were you calling which?
Coverage by more than one plan is the
So
option,
CSA and coverage exists and would be applicable to you guys
no matter what.
no matter what.
Yeah.
Mixed service is what MSRS general and correctional do.
That's right.
Well, this is you don't have to start both pensions within a year of each other.
But
You
but
do the
don't with the-
MSRS mixed method,
but you don't with the coverage by more than one plan either.
right? But can you explain why that's slightly more negative than mixed service?
It depends on the circumstance. It depends if your high five is different. If your high five is different, then yes, mixed service is more beneficial because you can apply both high fives. If your high five is in the same ballpark, there is no difference, right? Because you're
can
able
I
to.
ask for clarifying? I hear you say that a lot, and I don't know what it means when you say if your high five is different in what, like, if you're retiring at 60 and you're trying to, different in which way?
So let's say in the general plan benefit, your high five, I'm gonna go really low, guys. No, 5,000. I don't- Great. It's high five. Monthly. I went monthly there, guys. In my head. Is monthly at 5,000, right? And then you move to the new plan, but you're still in that high five window, which is your past 5 years, right? And there's no change to your high five.
Are you
So
saying if I leave general and I go to the new, leaving the general at whatever my high five was?
High five's free.
At that moment I left it?
correct, yep. And so then if you're in your high five though, that's not as big of a deal, right? Because your high five is gonna be pretty much the same. When it is a difference for members, and then take in mind the plan that doesn't have the contributions or paying that higher price, right? Then it's when your high fives are different, are starkly different, right? Then there is a difference and mixed service is more favorable to the member, but then the general plan is picking up a cost in which there's no contributions on. So I understand the value of mixed service. What I'm saying is that's a consideration that PARA has to look at because that does impact the general plan and impacts the accessibility to all of our members for the benefits that they have.
Correct me if I'm wrong, this would be effective to tier 1 people. Because we're kind of moving to that third option, right? Yeah. So the tier 1 people left and would affect them.
And then it would also like, like another circumstance to consider, and I haven't like thought this through, like
Tier 1 kind of ends, right? I mean, tier 1 ends once we bring it over.
Chad, this is a question for you. I don't know. I'm gonna put you on the spot.
No, the reason why MSRS does this with the general plan and the correctional plan is that folks in the correctional plan retire earlier than people in the general plan. And if you retire early at the correctional plan age, let's say you retire at age 55, under the correctional plan, you're going to get a much lower reduction for the correctional plan part of your service credit than you will in the general plan. The difference in that reduction going from age, the normal retirement age in the general plan to age 55, it's significant. It's like 50% of your benefits. So a lot of folks, they would want to wait until they're closer to age 65 so they can start taking that benefit. But if you do that under the combined service annuity rules, you have to start both benefits within 1 year of each other. We, in MSRs, our law allows us to do this as a mixed service benefit where you're using the same combined service annuity rules, but you're not. You're waiting until you're getting to an age where you're not seeing a huge reduction in your retirement benefit. Does that make some sense? That was a lot.
I have one question for you, Jennifer,
Yes.
of how this works, because I think we're gonna have a situation in which we have members in multiple plans, not just like this new plan, right? So what happens for the purposes of, let's say we have MSRS over here, you do mixed service and whatever, if we do mixed service, that's not my question. My question is, those members, when they go to take those two benefits, would still have CSA law apply to them if they want to take benefits, like how does mixed service and CSA with the other
Combined.
ones? Yeah.
Yeah, so for us, the mixed service only exists between the correctional plan and the general plan. We administer both of those, so there's not really a concern from the combined service annuity standpoint. You're asking, I think, let's say you start one plan now, like the correctional plan now, and you'll also have, let's say, a para.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The para general plan, you still have to follow the combined service annuity rules with. So they'd have to start the para general plan
Yeah.
within 1 year of starting the MSR's correction.
Yeah.
That's how that works right now. Does that answer your question?
Yes, no, we created a question, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm a great example. I am in Para General right now. I'm going to be moved to Tier 2, but I have years of service at MSRS. So the question is, if I retire out of Tier 2 using the CSA benefit, does mixed service apply to my MSRS? That was a headache. I can't believe I followed it.
I think I followed that. I think you're asking if we enacted the mixed service, would it then apply to the MSRS portion of the benefit? And it would depend on how we enacted the mixed service, but if you were implementing it in a way that's similar to how we do MSRS, you would not get it for the MSRS portion because it would only coordinate between Para's general plan and Para's new plan.
Okay.
I think, for me, I think this is important, for the older folks, they're not gonna get a lot of these benefits. We take all their years at 60. I want to make sure that if they have 10 more years and they want to take that 10 years that they got at 60, that they don't have to take the other years that they put in within a year. I want them to get that maximum benefit. So however, if it's fixed, then if that's how they do it or whatever, I want to be able to get that equation. And I think you guys are saying the same thing, right? We want to be able to, that they, just because they retired at 60 and they're taking something, they don't have to start taking this other pot of money that they contributed to at a reduction. I want that to be able to sit there and give them some options that they otherwise wouldn't have.
They would still have the reduction, but what they wouldn't have is they don't have to do it within the 1 year.
But they could let it sit there till.
Right. Right. Yeah, they could let it sit till 66.
Yeah, I mean,
But then they get the high five to be applied to both. That's the benefit of mixed service. Right.
No, they don't get the high five then.
If they do mixed service, and again, this is a conversation we'll have to have with our board, right, of treating. Yeah, I think it is slightly different in the sense that it is tiers within the plan, right, can do it. But I'm just saying we'll have to have a conversation with our board about this, because it is.
So there's cost, because if they have that different high five, when they left that in.
But then the plan itself is eating that cost, right? Like if we're moving, this is where like I have to think about this a little bit because we're spinning this all out.
and it's gonna be within this new plan entirely, that's where I have to. And it's not gonna be something that is new plan crossing over the general. Right, it's only within this plan, within the tier of the plan. That's what I have to take up.
I just wanted to, so one other thing, and I don't like to chime in here too, and I know probation is different. But telecommunicators as a whole, I mean, they're not getting large increases of salary because they're not going to supervisor managers, you know, I mean, the bulk of our people are telecommunicators throughout their career. And honestly, if they're gonna be working a boatload of overtime to get a higher income, that's gonna be in their young years. Not when they get up to 50 and 60, that's when they slow down. Some of them, we have the anomalies out there. But to me, that's kind of where I see it, you know, that their high five might come at a younger age than the older age, but like, that is what actuaries are for, and you guys know the numbers. And I can't account for cops who can go sit and do an overtime job. Working on.
All right. I think we've agreed on the mixed service. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we have.
Okay.
I mean,
All right. And then opportunity to opt out of the new plan, is that still?
That's not, from parent perspective, that's not advisable.
Okay.
So we have very clear advice from our outside tax counsel that opt out is impermissible after sort of arrangement. With the qualifications and it's pretty.
We had committed to our membership that we would ask, and if it was possible for it to happen for the opt-out language, we would do so. If Para is saying that their legal counsel says that it's not possible, then it's not. But we wanted that opportunity for our membership.
Can I just throw out there, if there is, if we're looking for a solution, I appreciate what you said greatly, thank you. If we're looking for a solution, we can do a mandatory exception. There we go, that was like a mandatory exclusion. So if they could take, for example, I've heard of issues with the rule of 90 people pre-89. So we could do it where everyone that's pre-89 is excluded from the new plan and only participates in the general plan. I will say, as Bonnie noted in our conversation, though, that may change the cost, right? Because we're assuming everyone is participating in them. But I appreciate your stance on the opt-out. Thank you.
So where do you stand?
I'm looking at Courtney.
How many do you think?
Yeah, there's about between 40 and 50 people. And so I think it was helpful to us if we would have that on the front end so that the folks we try not to look at even might be in the room who are rule 90, have the opportunity to still have that benefit, on that benefit. But I think that was useful.
For mandatory.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amy, can I just, it's something different, we don't need into it, can I just talk to you about it at some point, maybe after the meeting, mandatory exclusion for opt-out, just because like some of my people, when they hear opt-out, they just think administrative.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be right now, I know the purpose for that.
Find out shortly that MSRS will allow opt-out. So, we'll need to.
Which could be like.
Well, they know how to manage it, so.
I don't know that there's a telecommunicator left.
Okay, so the opt-out would be a mandatory opt-out from rule 90, just verify that.
We're going to gather more information.
Gather more information. Okay.
About
All
the
right.
mandatory exclusion.
Mandatory
We need to
exclusion.
do that, yeah.
Mandatory exclusion. All right, purchase of credit for past service in Central State. There you have. My question was potential statement.
Well,
Just had lunch with Russell yesterday. Take the tree. As much as you want.
What we want, excuse me, is the ability to trying to do this on low food, blood sugar now. What we want is the ability to allow for purchase of past service credit, whether it is by the employee or by state aid if available. And we want that ability to have a blank appropriation line within the bill.
I think that makes sense. And I think that's a good approach to, does somebody else have any?
Was there agreement if there's not, I think what would be important, because our preference, we've stated, but folks have talked loosely about that meeting, was separating the two, so one doesn't hang the other. If it's in the bill, which is fine, we can go. Like appropriations line where legislators don't love them, are in frequently in bills. If it's not able to be funded, I want to just clear understanding that it's not that portion of it, the rest of that.
We agree. We agree.
And I'll just add, we've worked on the parameters from Paris perspective, and you guys are good with that. The purchase is made at time of retirement, actuarial equivalent, employer certification, and lump sum.
Yes. You see how we're all playing together here?
I do have one. And actually, we can do this on the back side because it's actually the question that's more technical. Does it have to be at the time of retirement? It can't be during the period of time.
Retirement and death and taxes is more allowed us to do the best.
It doesn't have to take our time up here. That's just a question.
Yeah, because if you're allowed to.
Yeah, that's fine. We're gonna maybe just go back to MSRS and see where we're at. We need any significant changes with MSRS.
So everything that we talked about here, we could do over in MSRS. The plan. Problem is cost. So 2%, 1.9% multiplier, and our retirement age of 60. I think we had a
(1.9% and 60 is the second column proposal to 5.5% increase. And then there's just sort of left the employer contribution discussion.
all this, then with 5.52%.
Memo is what we'd be encouraging, and I just want to put this in context because I think the cost amount is more important. Is that the 6% at least was only $2.something million. It's not a massive increase, and we're requesting to take probably 2/3 of that, up to additional 3.5% on top of employee pay. It would be the only plan outside of the one, let's say, where employees would be contributing more than the employers, particularly in the state plans. And that would leave for DOC about $500,000 per year. 2.02%. So that's kind of what we're at. We know you can't support
Zero
it.
authority to add any costs to my agency. And our understanding kind of from the get-go is that this has been it's an employee burden. They will shoulder the burden for this. And, you know, it obviously we you know, we won't stand in the way of that, but, you know, additional costs for our agency is truly problematic. I mean, you know, Devin, so.
So if we assume that there's. Then do you want to ratchet down your benefit structure?
Not at this time. I think it's relatively reasonable for the employers to take on, particularly for DPS, 120,000. Like, that's, well, I know DOC is in a different position. I do.
So you can draft a bill and then you can have an amendment. You draft it with 5.52 in for employee contribution increase and then an amendment that. Yeah.
It also affects.
No, absolutely, yeah, affects, and obviously, from my perspective, at a bare minimum, I'd like to see the state at least match what the para employers are contributing, make an argument to that effect, which is 1.25%. I don't have the fiscal numbers from DPS, what this costs. I just found out the other day, of course, that we could opt out. So if the number rises to above, or employee install, say it's 5% or 3.5 or they can opt out, which gave me some relief here, because I don't want to force that on the seat. I can speak for my group. We're willing to make adjustments as necessary to get to a level. Some go at the employer possibly and the employee, because I don't want to create a dynamic where an educated person looks and goes, well, I'm over here. Retire 6 years sooner, all things being equal, right? But it creates an issue. It's unfortunate, of course, the financial situation we find ourselves in. I do know they found an extra 900 million somewhere, so that was good news, maybe for the state budget. That's a lot of money asking, but I don't know if I answered your question. We're willing to work and we can get to a point that's acceptable. Obviously, I think we're going to work with Devin to try to figure out what that is today. Right now, probably 5% on the employee. Probably no. I don't see anybody saying yeah, based on some of the factors, right? The average contractual increase state employees are receiving the increase because of that new provision that's being enacted. But you know, something advantageous is better than nothing, in my opinion. Won't accept defeat, but even being able to retire 4 years earlier is a benefit because we already have that 0.9 multiplier. We already have the 1.75 fixed.
I don't know if that's a possibility to look at 62. What is the number if we modify the full retirement to 62? Does that nuance that contribution?
It gets it lower. I can give you that figure.
Yeah, that's right.
Right here.
Look at it.
4.32.
32%. Is that better? 32.
Well, it's particularly better if the employer takes in 1.25%. But at the end of the day, we're going to have a discussion if that money does not become available.
And I understand the employers are not on the same page. Like the bill that we brought forward that you had an opinion on also assumed quite a bit benefits for the employees where they would retire right out the gate. They would qualify for all their past service credit. It was just an unreduced annuity, no other lines in the sand. But I think particularly as employees are taking on 1.1 million and the employers are taking on the remainder, I think it's the pretty fair assumption. Particularly since of how low the actual dollar amount cost is.
You know, and having just gone through an exercise where we were, you know, conducting layoffs, so that's a really hard, you know, because it means additional cuts to our agency that I mean, it's been a rough go, you know that, and so that's why this is such a question. And it, you know, that titles are also important here, like finishing kind of the conversation, like what's this, who's it including, will come down to that bottom line as well. And whether or not the expectation is that the employer is gonna shoulder more than we might have to have a different conversation. You know, those titles that remain, what is we'd like to mirror again and what the county has ended up in this space, so that's a part of the consideration.
What's just a question, sorry, for the counties, what's the employer share currently?
For this hypothetical plan,
For just, yes.
7.5.
So that's the additional 1 point something increase that would match the sub plans as well, particularly for the state fire marshal plan.
It feels like I want to recognize the amazing progress that has taken place and how far we've come. I know, Susan, I've expressed that to you too, outside this group. I think that there's been great in all categories here. I think we're getting to a point where we're reaching like the hardcore limitations where it feels like we're either not that representatives that can speak in our entities' authorities to cap this off, and it also feels like there's a little bit of personal responsibility for the legislature to do on definitions. I think they're tough. I want to continue learning more. I'm an idealist that doesn't want to say no until the last stretch. So I think from our perspective, we want to keep working on, but we're not ready today to create the definitions. And if we aren't, we'll say, legislature, help us. Here's their perspective, here's ours. What do you want? I think for these contribution rates, Susan, I defer to you because you're such a professional up at the Capitol. No one likes to write a bill with empty, with a blank. But is it something that we need blank for the legislature, at least in the sections not agreed to the legislature to decide and what a support group have that?
Certainly, we can build with lines. The problem is that you don't know how that's gonna cover it all. Whereas if you run a bill and you have a couple amendments, then you're kind of giving them something to work with. Because otherwise, I know what'll come up.
Right.
It's got a bunch of lines, right? So there's different ways to do it, and we can go either way. However, the group thinks would be the best way to go for this one, because it, we can draft it one way and have an amendment then that, can be adopted, but otherwise it's kind of open. So,
One thing to keep in mind as well is, if the definition isn't decided, the actuarial information may not be correct with what the legislature decides it to be.
So the definition is what we're talking about, probation officer or telecommunicator. You just need to get back to us. I didn't think there was a big bunch of.
Telecommunicator for struggling with
You just have to get back on it, right? Or whatever it is. You just have to get back to us on it. I didn't know there was an open question.
And then the provision that identifies additional consideration or future consideration by the commissioner, kind of that, and there's language for the MSRS side in that space. And so some of the definitions and that where y'all land with that, we're looking to that to kind of cue us in as to additional titles being considered by the commissioner in the future as well. So there's like 3 things there, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we run out of time, we don't have a plan, that's okay too, right? I mean, we're just getting down and, we won't have holiday break. So just, we just will keep moving, that we get these resolved.
What's your comfort level though? I mean, the task was extremely tough to create a pension plan statutorily with varying conflicting interest curves with legislation by January 1st. I also don't think it's uncanny for us to say, hey, here's the legislation of what this plan, here's contextual background that you're tasking us with writing, which I think is a great idea, a perspective of these work groups, of where we agreed, and here's the statutory language that the language look like of where we agreed, and here's the legislative side. So I agree, I don't think it's fair to you to be pushing you to create some resolution for holidays where it just might not be without legislative.
Yeah, I think, January 15th was when we needed to have this all done. That's what we're up against. And if it's not done, and that's the report, we don't have recommended legislation, that is certainly an option.
I really, we've been doing this for quite some time. I think we need to get the definitions. So I'm disappointed that we don't seem to know the definitions of our relation. The job passed on this 8th meeting. And so it's frustrating when we're still talking about basics. About 2 meetings ago, we came to a definition, and the next week, we'll go back and questions. Now we're still not. It's concerning. And I do want to respect people's time, but we originally did not plan for this many meetings. I know it's a big task, but we need to get the definition. I think that is I don't want to go into December and we still don't know how to define completion on Friday.
Matt, are you thinking that you guys can come up with you need for definitions by next week?
We will either know if we can come up with something or if we just disagree with the definition given. And I'm trying, I hear you completely, and we're pushing our group to consider what the proposal is and what the request is from you. We did chat a little bit with Nicole and others last week. We appreciate that. We learned more. We asked questions. We're not the people in our group who are making the decision either. So, yeah.
Chair, yes, I just want to ask one question. I'm trying to come off this less frustrated than I am. Where this come? It didn't come up last time we made a proposal, the definition. What's different now? We didn't talk anything about the definition.
Last
time we went to the legislature.
Last meeting we had.
I'm talking last proposal we made, where our contributions were being increased a lot, didn't go through because of the inequity. We didn't talk anything about the definition. What's different?
Last session, we also did, and you're asking for us to get on board and support a meeting.
I thought you did.
Speak out against it?
We were brought up to the table and we spoke with some concerns, but we didn't have a position against there.
You say that you were fine with it because we were funding all the contributions.
Not once did I get up in front of the commission and say we're good with this stuff.
Maybe not against in front of the commission, but I've heard you say that. Because the counties didn't have to increase.
And Eric, to be clear, what I said behind the scenes in frankly confidence to you all was our employers are opposed to this. They are concerned. They're concerned with the litany of issues. One, the cost of it. You brought a plan that was like 5 or 6% added cost. That was a huge concern. The second was how this impacts our other work classes that we have to consider as well. Other groups that are watching what we are doing and saying, what about us? We're feeling left behind. What I said very clearly to you, and I agree, was your plan is unique. And what I love about it is that you guys are taking the cost of it. And I want to work with you on that. And I like that. I never once came to the Capitol and said, absolutely, we're supportive of this plan. There wasn't a big plan. There were questions that we had. And in fact, to show a good sign of faith and effort, I didn't testify with concerns or things we imposed. And I talked to Nicole, Nancy, and others to say, hey, let's keep these communication cycles going. So when we go back to the point of conflict here, which I still think the structural, how we fund this is the core. The definitions is one that I'm trying to work between your group, which is saying, here's what we want. State titles that are different than county titles, functions that are totally different, and trying to get all the people on board so that when I go back to administrators and commissioners, they also have a way to explain why we chose the people we chose. And that is tough, but I'm trying to lean into it and trying to figure out if there's a bridge that we can have.
Great. So I think we're in a different place last year. You just give it a good faith effort to try to come to the try to palm that off. That's where we Oh,
Yeah, for Susan and others, in no way, shape, or form, what affects the para dispatchers is gonna affect, or what affects MSRS dispatchers will not affect the para situation. They're two different scenarios. 100% supportive of what we put forward, for the para group as far as telecommunicators. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that. We recognize the challenges that they face are different. And I'm not gonna let 20+ years of smoke, but we need to recognize, because this does come up. I brought it up in my former position, the differences between para and MSR. Some are good, some are bad, and anytime we can get these plans more in line with each other, I think it's good, because then we can go before that commission with similar things, with the same issues. And again, I throw out there at a bare minimum, I'd like to see the employer step up and at least match that 1.25 contribution above and beyond that. Recognize the challenges, and I wish I had in front of me the cost of DPS right in front of me. We increased this by 1.25%. This is the cost of the agency. Salary savings, can that cover it? I know we're still understaffed in many areas, at least in EPS, both the patrol officers and telecommunicators. I don't think we were anywhere near full staff yet either, but I don't want numbers because I don't have them in front of me. But I just want to assure the group that the MSRS situation.
so in terms of the MSRS situation, would it, you prefer, Susan, to write out just a bill with amendments?
I would, but I defer to the group as to whether we want blank or not.
Yeah, I don't know how you guys feel, but like, I think if we offer amendments to the either or instead of a blank,
Yep.
that gives them something to shoot for. But if you leave it blank, so can we agree to that? We'll do that.
I would be more comfortable if we could move up on the employee contribution. We do the employer 1.25, knowing that we still have to work with POC and the employer, knowing that there's probably amendments, knowing that there's probably going to be maybe even some bullshit towards us, and we'll have to figure it out.
So what we put in this.
Just wanted to talk about the opt-in, opt-out piece just for a second, which is that MSRS likes that, doing it with these other sub-plans. It's worked really well for us. The information about it, creating a coda from payers tax council, that's new information for us. We think we can still go forward with it. Sure. This is.
Talk about line on that one.
Yeah.
All right. I don't think we have to go to the.
So unless anybody has.
Is there anything under that bullet point plan you can already determine that anybody needs to address? All right.
I just want to make sure that when we all come back and we have our notes and how we go back to our groups and report. This whole piece that para has to ask people if they want to opt out of Social Security 2 years later. Is that still going to be what you have to do when we totally move everything? And I just have great concerns about that. Because if people start opting out, they also, I believe they realize that their employer doesn't have to pay either.
With that, we can do what's called divided vote, Dar. And that's how we would operate this. And it is versus 3,000 people having to educate. This is only new hires within the next 2 years. So from 27 to 2029. I don't know. I think we'd have to accelerate. Can we do it in 2028? So we only have 1 year. So the pool is really limited of the amount of people who are going to be making this option, choosing. We can do a lot of education with a limited pool. We can do divided vote, which means that if it's a no vote, it's only impacting them And if it's a yes vote, they're in and all new hires are in. So the risk is limited and we can concentrate and focus. We actually just posted for a social security minister position. We're in the process of hiring it. So we'll have someone who can really like see this through, and I'm confident in our ability to conduct that election.
Employees, and a 1 or 2 year period, whichever choose, and they get to make the decision for all new hires.
Only for that. So if we do a divided vote, all new hires are in social security. And all yeses are in social security. If they vote no, only themselves are impacted. So the pool of people who vote no, who could be excluded are people who are choosing that, but only that. Not new hires, not the people who vote yes. If you do a divided vote, which is how we would do it. Yeah.
And it would not affect any existing.
Correct. All that coverage from the general plan covers the new plan. It's only new hires within the next 2 years of looking at the plan. Maybe we can conduct it within a year, so we only have to do it once. I know we have to do it. Yes. It's just the new hires.
So how do you do a divided vote?
So it's just, it's a term divided vote. So like they get to vote for themselves. And it's divided because the no's only get the no's, right? And then the yeses and new hires, future new hires go into the plan. Divided vote is only the term.
Amy, and the reason is just because you're creating a new plan, essentially that what required this vote.
Because if you go back to the general plan, with the general plan back in the 60s, voted to be coordinated with Social Security, it was a divided vote. And so that then, like, the current hires, again, their Social Security coverage moves over with the new plan. We are confident we can do a limited election for Social Security for the new hires. It's limited pool. Again, divided vote is the least risky option. We understand the importance of education, have a position that can help us with that. It is the best option for us.
So even if the majority voted no, and everybody hired after that is still a yes?
Yes, using a divided vote. Yep. Then you can do a majority vote, and I'm not even gonna talk about it.
No.
Yes, no.
Chad, do we anticipate any issues with MSRs? We create something where we have to do something similar, or do we not?
This is the first I'm hearing about this, but I would imagine that there will not be anything like this because it's not a new.
Yeah.
All right. Any other comments? All right, good. Thank you, everybody. We're going to move on to the preparation of work group recommendations and written report. So, does everybody have a copy? So everybody could have a copy of the report assignment. So we have some areas that people have already been assigned, and then we have other areas where nobody has been assigned. So I have a little list here of recommendations, but I'll let you volunteer first. So the first one is the section of the report introduction, summarize session law mandate, members of the work group, co-chairs, number of meetings, and summary of agendas. Is anybody willing to take? Is that what I offer, or just say, hey, maybe just pick one? Do you want me to all tell you? So would David Minicky and Joseph Matthews be willing to? Right, thank you. You're good.
Is not here.
Oh,
I think he's online.
okay.
So he.
Yeah. Summary of para, actuarial costs and new pension plans. Doug and Amy, so that's not a shock to you. Plan features definitions of eligible positions for new para plan. Amy Jo. Do that. Plan features definitions of eligible positions for MSRS subplan. Paula.
What am I signing up for?
The plan definitions of.
Pull down in the, I don't have it pulled up.
Sorry,
Just wanna see.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Leo, help me.
It's going so good, yes. Summary of other public safety adjacent positions considered in the groups and requested to be included. And work group decision to exclude all but probation and telecommunicators. Nicole and Dart.
I was told.
Thank you. Owen has already agreed, the plan feature, on the top. The next page, the employer contribution rates and new para plan. The next bullet down would be plan features of employer contribution rates, for new MSRS subplan, including summary of employers' positions and lack of consensus. Leah?
Sorry, I was writing.
We'll do it. Yeah, we'll add that to
Perfect.
it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, what she said.
Plan feature, the next bullet point down would, I'm sorry, Amy.
Can I just make it easy? All the next ones are, and I will say. Yeah, the plan features we can do. Okay, I just make that easy for you.
You made it really proud of us. So people owe you a couple of drinks. Yeah,
Sure. Why does it say and lack of consensus?
well, if we don't have a consensus on any public decision. So.
Yeah.
Right now, we have a consensus on probably 90% of the stuff, but it sounds to me like the definitions could be an example of where we do not have consensus.
The contribution rates, we don't, well, MSRS possibly, but
Yeah.
para at this point, we have consensus, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
you can cross that off. Yeah, right.
Okay.
And then what I may do, if it's like the employer, I may reach out to you guys and then I can like put it together.
Thank goodness, because I thought Amy was gonna explain something. Yeah. This is
So you're literally that whole second page.
Not the
everything with
MSRS stuff.
MSRS. So
Yeah.
that would be,
Yeah, and then I'll reach out to like the employee groups and the employer groups if there's like information I need from you guys, and we'll ask that you guys write up your little blurb about what you think. If there is that requirement.
so, the plan features for employee contribution rates, the new MSRS subplan, including summary of the employee's position in lack of consensus. Mike, Devin, you guys take that. Okay, and then, plan features post-retirement justice colas for the new MSRS subplan. Devin, would you? Can you be with? Perfect. Oh. Mike, will you do the multiplier resource? Okay. Perfect. Then we'll get you the names, you guys, everybody remembers. We're down to the plan features, employee contributions. As they are in the MSRS and fair general plans, I got Doug and Amy in them too. Then plan features, purchase of credit for past service, including summary of cost matrix from para.
Yeah.
That would be, would you guys do?
Yeah.
Good. Then plan features, opportunity to opt out within the matrix of person. Assuming that's you two then.
Yeah, for, like this is all for para, and
Yeah.
then I don't know who's doing. That is true. We probably should just put that, right? Like there's like
Yeah.
anything para related on the plan features. We'll take, we will ask for input if needed.
Yep.
We are not doing MSRS's work.
Shucks.
Sorry, Dad.
Man, so the report is, it is to give the guidance to the pension commission as more details of the whole thing, how the process went and where the issues are. Provided to the legislature.
Yeah, well, so it doesn't have to be beautiful. Like, it could be an email with 3 paragraphs. Just send it to Alina. And this worked really well in one of the other work groups where we had to do a report. You send it all to Alina, she'll take it and rework it so that it fits with everything else. And if there's any missing places, we'll either contact somebody or we'll draft them ourselves. So we'll handle the bill, but we're really thankful that you all are willing to take on drafting on this report. So don't worry about form, just give us something, summary. Great.
And I think too, you know, this is generally what we think should be in the report. If there's something in here that you desperately want the legislature to know that I didn't think about, just send me a paragraph and I can put it into the report sort of as needed. You know, if there's a point that you didn't get assigned to that you think you have a good thought, you know, I can take words a lot easier and work them in as needed versus trying to come up with every position.
So with that in thought, Kara can probably add the past service credit matrix, but we can do the write-up on the past service credit language.
Okay. You have the meetings.
Or at least a summary of.
Yeah, Tammy Jo, I was planning to reach out to you for that and compile.
Yeah, and then, yeah, we're gonna wanna have some input for.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I'm just doing the technical stuff. Right. Technical writing. You guys get to do your thing.
There we go. And then when we all have all this together, can we have some editing, like review kind of thing?
I think that's fine.
Yeah, I would definitely send out my version or our version and then people can send me red lines so I can try to work in and go from there.
So that's kind of going on after our next, I mean, can't happen now, but then after our next meeting, there might be a week or 2 of that kind of stuff going on back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess we didn't talk due date on this, so when do we ask the group to get stuff that'll kind of.
It says December 1 on the sheet is our proposed due date, but you have other thoughts. Yeah. But at least to get me like a first draft of things that I can then shoot back out to you after a week of putting things together.
Yeah, the problem is that the review you do of the report will probably run into the holiday. So. Try to get it done.
You submit the bill and that all January 15th.
So you're gonna send out a list of who's working on everything?
Yeah. All right, moving along, so for the next meeting, short of major changes from Doug or Amy, Susan's gonna start to draft the bill, so we'll have a very rough draft of the bill for the next meeting, kind of go over. But you understand it, that if something comes to light, then you probably have to change, but this is the process.
You said that you have a meeting with the tax force, remember on the 17th?
No, that's our meeting.
Okay, that was meeting before this meeting?
We met with, no, we don't have a meeting scheduled with the tax company. I think that was in the conversation of like, how long is it gonna take us to get that subsidy plan idea running? And I said that I think we could have that by December as well.
Great. Anybody else have anything?
I'm on the 17th.
We have it at 1 p.m. Do we need to adjust it, do you think, or? Well, it's kind of the bill, the definitions is kind of the big, so I think 1 o'clock.
I'll become that fine. I can probably the same thing. Joe and David, I have 1 or 2 that I cannot miss, but the meeting now, after the later, I'll be ready. If not, if you guys want to work first thing, then I'll make sure.
come here or are you gonna jump on?
We'll come here.
Is that, the hope is that meeting doesn't need to be that long. But if perchance somehow that's not correct, would we be served better by starting at noon and ending early and overflow if need be, or we're pretty confident that's enough time and we'll be fine at 1?
I have a relationship.
I mean, would this group, we start at noon and then we can get.
Absolutely.
And I'm fine. So noon to 2, in theory.
Mr. Chair, I will be remote for this meeting, so.
Okay.
Care to hear me on speaker.
You'll hang up. All right, thank you, everybody. I think this is a very productive meeting. We had a good lot of conversation. Is anything else? We even got out of here 20 minutes.
Look at us.
Clock didn't fall back.
Yeah, that's why I thought we were. I'm like, it's already 3, I'm so exhausted. No.
I've already been.
Not.